As you're taking it off, you really want to not touch it like I just did, the best of your ability. Just like with tint, it can, whenever you touch the film, tiny little things that you don't see on your fingers will inevitably end up on there. Most of the time, if it's microscopic, that's impossible not to happen. So that's just part of it. So over here now, I'm gonna wet down the entire surface. There shouldn't be any exposed electronics except for this on the 997 and older. This is a really easy mechanism to pop out. You need a 5mm socket. You remove the carpet over here, and there's a little plug that you pop out right here, and that's just a water seal. You pop it out right here. You put your 5mm socket, you need a socket about that long, and it turns this mechanism right here. Both sides, it's not a righty-lefty, loosey type situation. What it is you turn your wrench toward the driver. So if it's over there, toward the passenger. And then it kind of lifts the light up, and you just kind of wiggle it out and put it in there. So this really helps with 997s and older. They switched that design, I believe, on the 991. So this is 2012. So this is the last, there's an overlap between the 997s and the 991s. This is an overlap year, because the 991s came out in 2012, and 997s went up to 2013 with the Turbo S. So there we go, we have it all nice and have liquid on it. So now I'm gonna do one more spray on this. I grab it with my opposite hand on the part that's going to go over the fender right here. So that's going to wrap around, so it's not going to be seen by anyone. It's going to be under the hood, and same here. I like to walk backwards so it doesn't catch any extra dust. I do my best not to touch the film, the sticky side of the film, with my hands if possible. But sometimes it's not possible. Just lay it out. Get it good to where it's not going to fall off of the car. You don't want it to slide off and touch the tire. It's pretty close right there, so I'm constantly watching for that. That's pretty important. So I have 10% alcohol, the rest is water. What I like to do is just tack down the edge so that when I pull back on these, it's good to go. On the 997, I start at the back. Most other cars I start on the front, but since this piece is trimmed right here, on the 991s, it's one piece. And I like to tack that down and stretch back. 997s and older, typically, I start at the back and stretch forward. So get your lines close up to the edge. I have about a 1/16 of an inch at the edge. I like to start further back than I need to. I try not to just go flat, at an angle, and also snow plow, so I'm pushing the water away. So I go at an angle like this. Then you can kind of shovel it a little bit if you need to after you get that. So we're good to go there. The next thing, your cloth is just as important as what you're using. So that way I can tell that there's nothing under the PPF right here, so I'm ready to move on. I'm not going to have to come back and do this section because I know, because I wiped it off. Next thing, it's still nice and loose because I have a good soap mixture. This one I'm going to stretch just a hair over the edge, so I wrap this front. Normally on these I would have extended the material, I just didn't think about it on this one. But that's totally fine on this car. So we want to make sure this line is lined up before I lock this down. So just to help that out, I'm going to give it a little wrinkle on the outside. Kind of move that around a little bit so I'm not putting my fingers in there. Only trying to touch the outside of the film. Check this edge again. I'm going to hold it like that, come from the whole way, all the way, and that will prevent from getting any chicken skin, which is when the material sticks in one spot and the rest of the material stretches. So doing the whole long, nice and even right there will help prevent that. So now I can kind of go through and do it. Wherever you have it locked down already, don't ever push soap into or alcohol into. You'll just get adhesive lines. So I'm going to leave that right there for now, because I'm going to come back and spray alcohol underneath it in this big concave so it stays. I have a little piece of what looks like blue, so I'm gonna have to pull it back from here, which this is a good time to explain how I do that. This is a lot of material to pull back. I'm gonna get that dirty. Typically you want to pull from the bottom, so when you spray it out, contaminants wash out. But this one, with it having so much material up here and I would have to lift down here, I'm gonna lift it from this side and spray soapy water in there. I'm gonna make sure that my hands are clean enough. This spray paint should be fine. What I'm really looking for are little hairs from maybe a dog. I have a German Shepherd at home, dead skin, things like that. So you wanna only touch what is gonna be peeling over and spray under. And since this only had soap and water, it's still able to move up pretty well. Anytime you lift up though, wherever your edge ends, you want to gently massage the soap and water around so you don't get an adhesive line when you put it back down. All right, so we have plenty of soap in that area. Once again, I'm going to look and do the dreaded touching that side of the film, which you don't want to touch. Let's see if we can't get that little speck out. All right, we got it. I can barely see it. Okay, so once again, massage soap around wherever the line ends, because it's hard line right here, remember, because of the alcohol. So I really want to massage soap around right here to make sure I don't get any adhesive lines. I'm gonna go ahead and spray some slip on top again. Remember, you don't want to push soap into the locked-in area right here. You can see that little adhesive line. So I'm watching that and pushing up. Pushing from the locked-in area over here, over. I'm going to separate this fender into two. Everything on this side is going to go that way, and then this is going to go down. And now you can kind of see why this is so important. This is just as important as squeegee, because now I can see if there's any contaminants underneath as I go, before anything gets locked in. So this is good. Inevitably, whenever you peel it up, sometimes you get either an air pocket like this or another contaminant. so it's always a fighting game. I'm going to pick up again from the material that's left over, spray. I'm going to see if it's a contaminant or a bubble. It looks like some kind of a contaminant. It could be dried soap. If it's dried soap, if I get the majority of it out, it will go away. So that's looking good now. Here we are. Boom. So that spot is gone. I don't have a hard adhesive line right here because I still was using this rag to check before it gets really nice and stuck down. So, but now we have another issue. This whole area has started to dry out a little bit. So I'm gonna move it around to see what we're dealing with. It's not terrible. It's sticking here where I don't necessarily want it to just yet. I'm gonna pinch that so I'm not touching the inside of that film. Spray some more soap underneath it. Spray that. I should have sprayed this section with soap before I pinched it. So I really messed that up. But we're gonna be fine. Let's just wash that off. And then we'll double check this area to make sure there's not any contaminants since I touched it with my finger. So again, this has been sitting here long enough that we want to massage where the soap has been, so we don't get any hard line. Because that line, if it's just left alone, you'll be able to see if it dries. It looks like we're good. So normally this fender would have already been done in this amount of time, but since we found a little speck, it slows down the whole operation. So here we go. Right now we're at about just past 1/8 of an inch right here of a gap. Again, like I said earlier, what I should have done on this specific car, since I knew I was going to take out the headlights, is I should have extended the material and wrapped it around the front. But we're just going to move on. So I'm going to spray a little bit of alcohol just at the edge, so it's ready to go for the customer later today. So I'll lock that in where I want it to be. Get a little bit of adhesive slip on the outside with you can use alcohol with that. These are little fingers where my fingers were. Those are going to come out and level out in a couple days. If there is any weird wrinkle, that will go away. So there we go. We got that little section is good. But before it really dries out, let's check it with the towel. It looks good. Next, I'm going to grab this section because this is another overhang. I'm going to spray alcohol on the back side. And that's just going to make it to where when I stretch this material back within a 1/16 of an inch or closer to the edge, it's going to stay right where I want it to be. Since I am stretching over in this area, I'm not going to put any slip. I'm going to keep it dry right here, just so my hand has a little bit more grip with the stretch. So I'm really focusing right here on this line for a minute. And then start further back than you need to. Remember to do that snow plow. And that's looking really good. All right, there's a scratch on this car. It has 30,000 miles already. So I know there's a little scratch here. Anytime you have a higher mileage car that you're installing PPF on, you want to know where all your little scratches are. So you don't pull back the material wondering if you need to do a section. Because every time you lift up the material, you're in danger of getting contaminants. So in this particular area, I'm gonna go ahead and lock down this edge where I want it to be with alcohol that I just sprayed. I want that to be right there, and then I can get all of these out. Not just by going straight down. Since I have this big fat finger here, I'm gonna go ahead and go further back than I need to, work it out, and then I'm gonna shovel. And when I'm shoveling, I wanna break this finger up into smaller fingers and push the material down. I'm gonna spray a little bit of alcohol in it so that it wants to stay. And that finger that could have been an issue is gone now. So remember, we locked in this corner, so we don't want to just go straight down into it. We can go down a little bit, and we can go out, across, and then start from here and go forward. Start further back than where we need to, and go down. This is a problem area on 911s while they dry out. It's good to get a little tiny bit of tension and a little bit of alcohol. Because if it's loose, you end up with a finger like this while it's drying. So what you do, just a tiny bit of tension, get alcohol in it, start further back every time than you need to, because repetition on the film, getting out water bubbles is good. There we go. So that's gonna stay down. I'm gonna end up having to trim back a tiny bit because it's more important to keep the paint clean and go over a tiny bit and trim back a little bit after you have a lot of experience cutting. So we're good to go there. Just gonna dry it off with my micro towel. It's the same kind of material that you use to clean your glasses with. And it takes away all the streaks so you can actually see if it looks good or not. All right, so let's readjust this area a tiny bit. I'm just gonna gently, right at the edge, just get a little bit of alcohol under it. The alcohol just helps it stick down more like vinyl. It's never gonna be like vinyl, but it's at least more like vinyl. And just like vinyl, you always wanna make sure you leave an escape for air. And in this case, you need an escape for the alcohol and the water and soap. So you don't wanna just lock it in right here, because then you end up with a big bubble. And just like this finger that was over here, we have a big finger here. So we want it to stick down the first time. And again, I only have about 10% alcohol, water up to about here. It fluctuates. But now, if you put too much alcohol and let it sit there, it'll start getting cloudy on the film. Basically what's happening is you're burning the adhesive. You can get away with that on a white car maybe. It's still not ideal. But you want to make sure that your mixtures are good and set up. So on this, I had all those little fingers. When I went down shoveling it instead of sliding it, it kind of helped move those fingers down like you would with dry vinyl, and makes tiny little fingers so that there's no tension on this section right here, and there's not any extra film because I'm spreading that all around. All right, so this side of the fender, the wheel side, is all done for the time being. I'm gonna let this dry out, and then it will go down much smoother in a second. So now we need to move over to this side over here. So this was only soap, there was no alcohol, and you can kind of see how I can move it around a little bit. It was starting to dry out a little bit, but I'm picking it up with an area that I can either trim off later on down here, or I can just lay that down. So I can get some fingerprints and or dust that's on my fingers on the edge of the film on this side. We're not quite as worried. This is already dry on a hard line. So what I need to do is I'm gonna peel back a tiny bit, get some soap and water on this whole line right here. And I'm gonna massage that line with soap and water. I'm pushing pretty hard, not like super hard, but I'm giving it a decent amount of force. So now, and then if you're ever curious if you're gonna have a hard line or not, you can go ahead and just do a little test strip. So right now I have no line. What you can have is a full gradient that you can still see the edge of, and that's okay. So you can have a full light gradient that almost looks more like this line right here. If you see a hard soap line like this that's fully dry, that's the one that's not going to come out. We're just kind of pretending like that's a hard line. If it looks like that after you squeegee it, it's not going to really come out over time. And that's the hard part about PPF, is it takes a full month to fully cure. And it really helps if the customer puts it in the sun. Something I tell with all of my customers that come to my shop that is to keep it in the sun as much as possible. You want the UV rays to really hit it, and somehow this material is porous enough that it will evaporate through and get a lot of the water bubbles out. But what happens sometimes is you'll get water bubbles that evaporate and leave air behind. And at that point, you need the little needle to pop it. So basically what I have customers do, this is really good customer service. Let every single customer know that whenever they come to you, you need to tell them, hey, come back in a month after the material is fully cured and let me check over your whole car that I did any PPF work on. This does a few things for you. One, if they're happy, you might have a chance to upsell maybe a window tint or maybe some more PPF. If they're unhappy, you get a chance to make it right for the customer, which is even more important because your name is everything and you will mess up. And that's just part of it. So always put money aside to pay for extra material whenever you need to fix stuff. And then you start the process over again and have them come back in a couple weeks next time, just to make sure that they're feeling comfortable with everything. So in this little area, I put alcohol down. It's sticking really good. We have a little finger right here. I'm gonna spray some alcohol. I'm gonna make sure that I don't get anything in that right there. Shovel it in. Dry it off, make sure there aren't any weird adhesive lines. So here in Colorado, you really want to get out as much of the bubbles as you possibly can. In the summer, the heat of the day will help you, but anytime you're installing the car in the winter, you really have to double check. That's why this is so important. You have to squeegee out super hard to make sure you get as much of the fluid out, because in the winter, sometimes it'll leave and freeze. That's mostly really apparent on window tint here. The PPF is more forgiving, but the PPF is not as stretchy and moldable in the winter. It gets pretty cold. So temperatures really do matter whenever you're installing it as well. So that's something else to watch out for. So from here, I've already used Xpel's product to put on the edges. So this product right here, it's PPF surface prep. So you don't want to put this on plastic. Be very cautious to put it on carbon. In fact, I would just say don't put it on anything carbon. because sometimes the heating process with carbon fluctuates on how it's processed before it goes on the car, and it can eat through the clear coat. So this stuff you only really want to use on the inside of edges. You don't want to put it on the outside. You only put a tiny bit of a dab on a towel, just like maybe a dime size, and that should be enough to do all your little edges around two fenders. And be very cautious with it. So this edge has already been edge prepped with that, and that's an Xpel product, just like the PPF. I'm going to go ahead and put alcohol on this edge. You can go a few ways. You can let this completely dry out, and you can put like just straight hot water or something like that to get the soap out and have it ready. Or you can do the edge prep, which will have it'll stay down. You might ask, if the edge prep could be an issue for some people, why would you want to use it? Well, let's say that this car, if I'm doing this car for a dealership and they've sold it to someone outside of the state, I want to make sure that every single edge is staying down, because I don't have that opportunity for them to stop by the dealership in a month for me to check to make sure everything is staying down properly for them. So I really have to be extra cautious to make sure that I'm getting everything down the first time. And if you're doing dealer work, it's good to know if the car is going out of town. Not because you're gonna try harder on the car. You should always be trying just as hard on every car and having the same product. But what you might do is slow down the delivery process to the dealer. That way all of your edges you've already double checked, maybe an extra day or so. And then it's always good to stop by the dealer just to double check on any car that hasn't left yet, or become really good friends with your salesman. So they'll tell you whenever your car is about to leave. Say it's like, hey, this car that you did for me is going to Idaho in 2 hours. Take some time out of your day and go double check that car before it leaves. You typically will always find something that you can make a little bit better. So we're looking good here. This area we'll go ahead and lay down for the sake of showing everyone. So it is pretty dry up here, that's good. I got 2 little spots of water, but I'm gonna go ahead and just put alcohol down. Something I really like to do, I don't like to let it dry and just push your finger over. It can work, but what happens is you get an inconsistency on the edge. And say you're mowing a lawn, it's so easy for anyone that sees a lawn that you just mowed, it will look terrible if you don't weed eat. So this is your weed eating. You might have, everything might look amazing, but if you have bad edges, this is where everything's gonna make or break your product. So don't just heat it up with a heat gun. You can do that to dry it out, but you can also fry the material and you'll have to start over. What I like to do is let it dry out a little bit, spray alcohol, go over the whole line, push forward again, start on the arete, on the edge, push over. Squeegee the line again, push over. Squeegee down the line again. And what this does is it just helps prevent any bubbles from staying right there on the edge. And you don't have to go super slow with it. Pay attention to what you're doing. Just like that. Wipe it off, see how you did. get a different view. I do have a little pocket of alcohol maybe right here, and since it is alcohol and not just soap and water, I want to make sure I get that out because it can corrode the adhesive just a tiny bit. But I got it out. So just like that, the fender is done, it's ready to go. I'll come back and trim this after it's dried out more. If you trim it while it's a little wet, you have a tendency to lift the film as you're pulling back on it. So in a little bit, we'll just kind of double check that everything's staying down, and that's kind of a wrap. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope this really helps you with 997 Porsches or any kind of fender with PPF. Hope you have a good day.